So you watched Kaveh's basics guide, and now you're wondering how to build him for like mid to late game. So in this video, we are going to look at Kaveh. We are going to look at said builds for mid to late game. We're actually going to talk about two kinds of builds, three different teams. So real quick, we're going to refresh on the build of the Kaveh that we are first using. Kaveh is level 50 out of 50 with 14,000 HP, less than 1,000 attack, but over 1,000 EM. Split 5 over 50, 123 ER. For weapons, he does have a level 80 R5 Rain Slasher. For artifacts, this is my Yao Yao set, 2-piece Gilded, 2-piece Wanderer's Troop. He is C6 and his talent's 144. Now again, because he's not level 60, we are going to be missing out on this passive, where we're going to be missing out on about 100 EM from this passive, so it could be even higher. I did want to talk about first him in a team that is going to be more of like a standard Kaveh team, using him really as a Dendro driver for something like Hyper Bloom, but also to blow up some of his own blooms, right? I said in the basics guide that he's kind of like a 4-star Nilou. Well, that's not entirely true. It's not entirely not true too, right? Because he makes his own blooms, or if a bloom is made, he can then use his skill or his burst to blow up said blooms. The kind of problem that I've found out is that even if he forces them to blow up, he is not the owner of said bloom. So if you don't have a ton of EM on everybody, it's not going to be calculated purely off of his EM, right? So that does make it, I'm going to use the phrase, less useful. If these blooms blowing up from Kaveh were always considered his ownership, because he's the one forcing them to blow up, then it would work much, much better. But because that's not how it works, it's not as good as it seems kind of on paper. But you can still use him as a very successful on-field Dendro driver to create hyper blooms for like Kuki to hyper bloom, and then he can detonate some of them, giving just like a little bit of damage where you would be able to Kuki's skill pulses every so often, so you can almost blow up the ones that Kuki's skill doesn't trigger. Or if Kuki's skill runs out and his burst is still going and we don't want to waste his burst, then we can still make him blow them up. So it's not going to be a super bad. Of course, at C6 he is going to be better, because then his burst will also blow up the blooms that he is creating, and if you can time it correctly, you'll get in between Kuki's pulsing, so you can do a lot of damage. There's not going to be much downtime of this Dendro damage going on. Now, real quick, we are going to look at the artifacts. Remember, these are my Yao Yao's artifacts, so I was trying to get HP in the substats. So just remember that we are going to talk about what you actually want for Kaveh though. Now this is going to be a little bit of a standard build, right? We want as much EM as we can get on Kaveh, especially in a bloom team, especially in this kind of bloom team. So 2-piece Gilded, 2-piece Wanderer's Troop is going to be a very good set. For the flower, this one's got HP, EM, defense, and then defense. The ideal substats for something like Kaveh is going to be EM, ER, crit rate, crit damage, right? That's mainly what we're going to want, with as much EM and ER as we can get, so that way we can use his burst off of cooldown. This plume has HP %, EM, flat HP, and then defense. Again, this is my Yao Yao stuff, that's why I'm trying to get HP on them. Now, I did want to talk about the 4-piece Gilded set, which is, I believe, his best set. Basically, what happens is whenever you cause an elemental reaction, for every character in your party that's the same element, which would be Dendro, you get attack buff. For all the different elements, you get an EM buff. So in the team that we were using Kaveh, he would get 1 attack buff from Nahida and then 2 EM buffs from Shincho and Kuki, meaning that he would have an extra 100 EM, getting 20 more EM than a 2-piece. So if you were to run him as the solo Dendro driver, then you could get 150 extra EM. You would need to invest a lot into his energy recharge though, so that way you can use his burst off of cooldown always. So running 4-piece Gilded, ER. Focus more on ER than crit rate, crit damage. Now for the sands, of course, elemental mastery, and then in the substats, you know, we want ER, we want crit rate, we want crit damage. Another EM goblet, that one is horrible, and then EM on the circlet with ER, which this one would have been really good. That a flat attack, flat defense, if that had been crit rate and crit damage, that would have been perfect. For weapons, R5 Rain Slasher. Rain Slasher is going to be a really good option, and not only in this team, but in the other team that we're going to look at too, where it's going to be more spread and aggravate. This is going to get up EM. Its passive increases damage against opponents affected by Hydro and Electro by 36% R5. This is going to be really good in something like a quick bloom team or an aggravate team, or even just a regular bloom team. This is going to be a really good option for that. Now, if you do not have this weapon, there is a 3-star called the Blood-Tainted Greatsword. This is going to be very easy to get, just doing some pulls. It's going to give actually more EM at the same level, 171 versus 151, but its passive is not as good. It increases damage against opponents affected by Pyro or Electro by 24%. So it's a low percentage, and it takes out Hydro for Pyro. So this one isn't as good, but it does get up your EM a little bit more. Now, the next team that I want to look at is actually going to be, if I were to take Yao Yao out of my Bountiful core team and put Kaveh in. Now, the reason that I would do this is because Kaveh, we don't have to worry about him stealing the blooms, right? Like forcing them to blow up, because Bountiful core makes them blow up so fast anyway. So it's not like he'll actually be able to do that. But whenever he takes damage from a bloom core, it'll actually heal him as well. So this allows him to be an on-field Dendro driver for Bountiful Core, and you don't have to worry about the self-damage that comes from Bountiful Core, because he just heals it himself. So we don't have to run as many healers or a shield or anything like that if we use Kaveh as the on-field Dendro driver, just because you're going to notice down here, his HP is going to be going down, and then it's going to get back up, and it's going to go down, and it's going to get back up, and it's going to be fluctuating because he is healing himself. So if we have enough Hydro present from just Nilou skill and like Coco, then we're going to be able to create a lot of Bountiful cores using Kaveh. This is another team where we would want as much ER as possible, so that way we can have him on the field using his burst as much as possible to just create a ton of blooms. Now, Kaveh is level 50 and not level 90, which would increase his bloom damage a ton, to where he would be hitting roughly the same as like Coco and Nikita and Nilou in this, hitting all above 40k. Well, Nilou's almost hitting 40k, but he would still be able to output a ton of damage, and it would have his Dendro application would be very, very good for this, especially coupled with Nihida and Coco's off-field and Nilou's off-field, right? You have a chance to make a ton of Bountiful cores. And I know that I've been saying in some comments and stuff, like, I don't know about Kaveh in a Bountiful core team, but once I actually tried it, it actually wasn't that bad. It made me question, should I replace Yao Yao with Kaveh? But my Yao Yao does also create a ton of blooms, and there's enough ER on my Yao Yao with this artifact set that I'm able to use her burst off cooldown. So I don't think I am going to swap it out. I think I'm going to leave Yao Yao in. But if you didn't have Yao Yao, or if you didn't have Nihida, then this could be a very, very good option for a Bountiful core team. And something else that I wanted to try, I actually wanted to try like an all 4-star Bountiful core team except for Nilou, right? And with that, I was going to do Nilou, Kale, Kaveh, and then like Xingqiu. You could do Barbara instead of Xingqiu if you wanted to have that healing in there, but I wanted to try it just to see how it would work. And it actually worked out fairly well. Kale was actually able to help battery Kaveh a little bit and give him some ER or give him some energy for his burst. But then Kale was also able to give a little bit of an EM boost. And then with her being C6, the boomerang's just going to sit there and spin around Kaveh, producing even more blooms. So it actually worked out fairly well. And if I didn't have Nihida and Coco, then I would probably run this team but have Barbara instead of Coco, because it actually worked fairly well. And it's still able to output a ton of damage. Now for the final team, we are going to talk about a spread and aggravate team. And essentially this is going to use the same team that I'm looking at running with Tighnari. We're just going to put Kaveh in for Tighnari. Kaveh actually being on field, doing Dendro application with Beidou is going to work out pretty well. We are going to lose the entirety of his kit focused around blooms doing this though. But even with that being said, you can still do a fair good amount. Beidou's probably going to out-damage Kaveh. Neither of them have artifacts for this, and Beidou's already just out-damaging Kaveh, right? Fischl is also going to be out-damaging Kaveh. This would literally just be allowing Beidou and Fischl to get the majority of the damage. And I think that Alhaitham or Tighnari would be better suited for this, but if you don't have either of them but you wanted to do a team like this, then you definitely could do Kaveh. Now we would do slightly different artifacts, being something like 4-piece Gilded or 2-piece Deep Woods, 2-piece Gilded, 2-piece Deep Wood, 2-piece Wanderer's Troop, and we would be trying to get a good crit split on Kaveh. Whereas before we weren't worried about the crit split, we would be worried about it now. So if we did do this, we would be doing something like a 2-piece like my Alhaitham has, and we would be trying to get a good crit split, right? We'd be going for crit rate and crit damage versus ER, especially if we had a second Dendro in that team helping power, helping battery Kaveh, we would be able to have a little bit less ER. We would still need a fair good amount, but we would start really looking for a crit rate, crit damage split, so that way he could do damage with spread reactions. Now that is going to be it for this video. If you have any questions, you be sure to leave it down in the comments. Myself or someone else will be sure to answer it, and I'll see you in the next one.